The billionaire went bankrupt, but the single father and his daughter got everything back. The silence of the Melbrook Hotel at 3 a.m. had a specific weight. It wasn't just the absence of sound, but the presence of bankruptcy. Celeste Davenport sat on the cold marble lobby floor, still wearing the royal blue blazer she'd worn to the meeting with lawyers 8 hours earlier, when she discovered that Marcus Holloway, her business partner and ex-husband, had transferred all company assets to accounts in the Cayman Islands, leaving her with nothing but the mortgaged building and a $4 million debt that felt like an anchor dragging her to the ocean floor. At 27 years old, she had built an empire from the modest inheritance her father left. A small beachside hotel she'd transformed into a chain of 5 luxury properties spanning the California coast. The Melbrook was the crown jewel, the first one, the original, carrying the name her father had chosen by mixing Mel and Brook, sweetness and constant flow. He'd been a poet in his soul, her father, though he'd made his living managing a modest seaside inn. Now the Melbrook was all that remained of everything she'd built, and even that wasn't really hers anymore. The tears had dried hours ago, leaving salt tracks on her tanned cheeks that she couldn't bring herself to wipe away. What remained was an emptiness so profound it felt physical, as if someone had excavated her chest with surgical precision and left only a cavity where her heart used to beat. Her phone had died around midnight, the battery giving up just like everything else in her life. She was grateful for that. No more calls from creditors with voices like automated recordings. No more messages from friends who didn't know what to say and settled for hollow platitudes. No more notifications about her name trending on business news sites with headlines like, "Hotel heiress loses fortune in marriage fraud," and "From penthouse to bankruptcy, the Celeste Davenport story." The sound of wheels on marble made her lift her head. A cleaning cart appeared from the east corridor, pushed by a man in a blue maintenance uniform with bright yellow gloves that seemed absurdly cheerful in the dim lighting. Ryan Walker was 34 years old, though his face carried the kind of weathered dignity that came from years of honest manual work, rather than from age itself. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar in a way that suggested he cut it himself to save money. There was a grease stain on his right sleeve that no amount of industrial washing would remove, a permanent badge of his second job as a motorcycle mechanic at a shop down by the marina. He stopped when he saw her, his hand still gripping the cart handle. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he said, "Ms. Davenport," his voice careful but not pitying, which she appreciated more than he could know. "You're here late." She almost laughed at the understatement. Late, as if she had anywhere else to go. The penthouse apartment downtown with the floor-to-ceiling windows and view of the bay was Marcus's now. He'd kept it in the divorce settlement, arguing that his family money had paid for the down payment, conveniently forgetting that her earnings had covered every mortgage payment for 3 years. The beach house in Malibu with the private access and the outdoor shower she'd installed herself was collateral for loans the bank had already called. Her mansion in the hills, the one she'd bought with her own earnings from her first successful hotel expansion, had a lien against it as of 10 o'clock this morning. "I suppose I am," she said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears, hollow like it was coming from the bottom of a well. Though late implies I plan to leave at some point. Ryan set down the cleaning supplies carefully and walked closer, but not too close, respecting the invisible boundary that social convention drew around a woman sitting on the floor of a hotel lobby at 3 o'clock in the morning. He was tall, lean in the way of men who worked with their hands and couldn't afford to waste calories on extra weight. His work boots were worn but meticulously clean, she noticed. Everything about him suggested a man who took pride in what he did, even if what he did was considered menial by people who'd never had to do it. "I heard what happened," he said simply. "The staff's been talking. It's all anyone can talk about, really." "I'm sure they have," Celeste said, pulling her knees up and wrapping her arms around them. The posture made her look younger, more vulnerable, less like the commanding CEO who'd walked these halls just yesterday and more like a lost child. "I'm sure they're also wondering if they'll still have jobs come Monday, if I'll be able to make payroll, if this place will even still be standing 3 months from now." "Some are wondering that," Ryan admitted, and she appreciated his honesty. Another person might have lied, tried to make her feel better with false reassurances. "But mostly, Ms. Davenport, they're worried about you." Maria from housekeeping cried in the break room today. Tommy from maintenance wanted to take up a collection to help with legal fees, until someone explained that legal fees for something like this probably cost more than all of us make in a year combined. The kindness in his words hit her harder than any of the vitriol she'd received from business associates, who'd melted away the moment her fortune disappeared. She felt her throat tighten, fresh tears threatening, and she forced them back through sheer willpower. She'd done enough crying today. "I'm the one who's supposed to take care of them," she said quietly. "I'm the CEO. Or I was. I'm not entirely sure what I am now. Failed businesswoman? Cautionary tale? That woman who was stupid enough to trust her ex-husband with financial access? You're a person who's had a catastrophically bad day," Ryan said, and there was something in his tone that made her look up at him properly for the first time. "That doesn't erase who you were yesterday, or who you'll be tomorrow." Celeste looked at him, really looked this time. She'd seen Ryan around the hotel for the past 2 years. Always efficient, always polite, one of those people who seemed to materialize exactly when you needed something cleaned or fixed, and then disappeared just as quickly. But she'd never truly noticed him before, not as a person. That was the privilege of power, she supposed. You could exist in spaces without seeing the people who maintained them. You could benefit from their labor without acknowledging their humanity. Now stripped of that power, sitting on the floor in her wrinkled designer blazer with her makeup smeared and her carefully constructed world in ruins, she saw him clearly for the first time. Dark eyes that held intelligence and something deeper. Experience. The kind that came from surviving genuine hardships rather than just witnessing them from a comfortable distance. Hands that were calloused and strong. A face that had laugh lines around the eyes despite whatever struggles had carved other, harder lines around his mouth. "A bad day," she repeated, and heard the bitter edge in her own voice. "Is that what we're calling fraud, betrayal, and complete financial ruin? A bad day? Like I forgot my umbrella when it rained or spilled coffee on my shirt?" Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then he said in that same conversational tone, "My wife left when our daughter was 3 months old. I came home from a double shift. I was working 2 jobs even then, trying to save money for the house she wanted, and found Hannah in her crib, alone. There was a note on the kitchen counter that said, 'I can't do this, I'm sorry,' past tense, as if she'd already left, already become someone else by the time I read those words. She'd emptied our bank account, taken the car her parents had given us, disappeared." Celeste stared at him, not knowing what to say, not sure if there was anything to say. "I stood in that empty apartment," Ryan continued, his voice even, as if he were recounting something that had happened to someone else, "and I listened to Hannah crying in the next room and I thought my life was over. Not metaphorically over, actually over. I didn't know how to be a father by myself. I didn't know how to afford childcare on a janitor's salary. I didn't even know how to change a diaper properly. My wife had always done that part. I stood there and I thought very clearly, very calmly, that I couldn't do it, that I would fail, that Hannah deserved better than a father who was already failing before he'd even started." "But you didn't fail," Celeste said softly. "Not yet anyway," Ryan replied, and there was the ghost of a smile on his lips. 7 years later, Hannah and I live in a studio apartment above a garage on the east side. It's not much, 400 square feet, 1 bathroom, a kitchenette that's really just a hot plate and a mini fridge. I work 2 jobs. I ride a 30-year-old Harley Davidson that I rebuilt myself engine by engine, because I can't afford a car and the bus route doesn't run early enough for my morning shift. And you know what? We're happy. Not every day, not every single moment. There are days when the rent is due and I'm $50 short and I have to decide between fixing Hannah's shoes or fixing my own. But we're happy. We have each other. We have a life that's ours. "I don't see how that's supposed to make me feel better," Celeste said, but there was no bite in her words, only exhaustion. "It's not," Ryan replied simply. "I'm not trying to minimize what you're going through, Ms. Davenport. Losing everything is losing everything, whether it's millions or hundreds. Pain isn't a competition. But I am telling you that the bottom is a real place. When you hit it, you discover something important. It's solid. You can stand on it. You can breathe on it. And if you're brave enough, if you're desperate enough, you can even build on it." A sound echoed from somewhere deep in the hotel, a pipe groaning as water moved through it, or maybe a door closing in a far wing, or perhaps just the building settling into itself the way old buildings do. The Melbrook had good bones, her father used to say. Built in 1972 during the optimistic expansion of California's tourism industry, renovated in 2005 to meet modern luxury standards, then again in 2015 when Celeste took over and made it her flagship property. It had weathered economic downturns, 2 major hurricanes, changing tastes in luxury accommodation, the rise of Airbnb, the pandemic, everything. Now it would weather her failure too. The building would survive. She wasn't certain she would. "I don't know how to build from nothing," Celeste admitted, and it felt like a confession, like admitting to a sin she'd been taught never to voice. I've never had nothing before. Even when my father died and left me just this hotel, it wasn't nothing. It was something. It was enough. I knew how to take something and make it more. But nothing? I don't have the first idea where to start. Then maybe it's time to learn, Ryan said. He hesitated and she could see him weighing his next words, deciding whether to overstep. Then he added, if you want help, I'm pretty good at building from nothing. It's kind of my specialty. It's what I do every day. Take broken things and make them work again, take nothing and turn it into something Hannah and I can use. Before Celeste could respond, before she could process what he was offering or whether she was brave enough to accept it, another voice cut through the silence of the lobby. High, clear, and completely unexpected in this space at this hour. Daddy, you said we'd go home after you cleaned the lobby. You promised we'd make pancakes before school. A little girl appeared from the same corridor Ryan had emerged from, wearing a yellow sundress with white flowers embroidered on the hem, and white sneakers that lit up with each step. Her blonde hair was pulled back into 2 ponytails secured with pink elastics, and she carried a worn stuffed rabbit under one arm. The rabbit was gray, or had been once before years of love had faded it to something closer to brown, and one ear was distinctly shorter than the other, suggesting a repair job done with more heart than skill. Hannah Bell Walker was 7 years old and possessed the kind of fearless curiosity that hadn't yet learned the world could be cruel, hadn't yet discovered that questions could be unwelcome, or that her presence might be an imposition. Hannah, Ryan said, and his entire voice shifted when he spoke to her. Softer, warmer, filled with a tenderness that made something ache in Celeste's chest. I told you to wait in the break room. I said I'd only be 10 more minutes. That was 20 minutes ago, Hannah pointed out with the precise time consciousness of children who've learned to count carefully. I counted, and I got bored, and Mr. Hopscotch wanted to see what you were doing. She held up the rabbit as evidence. Then she noticed Celeste sitting on the floor, and her bright blue eyes went wide with surprise and concern. Daddy, why is the pretty lady sitting on the ground? Did she fall down? Is she hurt? Should we call 911? Celeste found herself smiling despite everything, despite the ruins of her life scattered around her like debris from an explosion. Something like that, she said. But I don't think 911 can help with this kind of falling. Hannah walked over with the fearless directness of childhood and plopped down beside Celeste, crossing her legs carefully and arranging her dress so it covered her knees properly. When I fall down at the playground, Daddy says I should get back up and try again, she said seriously. But he also says sometimes you need a minute to sit there first and make sure nothing's broken. Is that what you're doing? Sitting for a minute to check if stuff is broken? Yes, Celeste said and realized it was true. I'm sitting for a minute. That's okay, Hannah said with the absolute certainty that only a 7-year-old could possess. Sometimes minutes are really, really important, like when you're sad and you need to cry, or when you're mad and you need to count to 10, or when you're scared and you need to take big breaths. Daddy taught me that. He says feelings need time to be feelings before you can do anything about them. Your daddy is very wise, Celeste said. I know, Hannah replied matter-of-factly. He's the wisest person I know. Well, him and Mrs. Chen, who lives downstairs. She's 93 and knows everything about everything. She taught me how to make dumplings. Do you want to hold Mr. Hopscotch? He makes me feel better when I'm sad. He's very soft and he's a good listener. She held out the stuffed rabbit with both hands, as if presenting something precious and irreplaceable, which Celeste supposed he was. The rabbit was threadbare, clearly well-loved, with button eyes that had been replaced at least once and mismatched patches on his body from repairs done over years. One ear was definitely shorter than the other, but there was something about the way Hannah offered him that made Celeste's throat tight. Thank you, she said, taking the rabbit carefully as if it were made of spun glass rather than worn fabric. I'll be very gentle with him. It's okay if you cry on him, Hannah said generously. He doesn't mind getting wet. I cry on him all the time, like when I had to get shots at the doctor, or when Emma from school said my shoes were ugly because they don't have the fancy lights, or when Daddy has to work late and I miss him. Ryan was watching this exchange with an expression Celeste couldn't quite read, something between pride and embarrassment, love and worry. Hannah, he said gently, we should let Ms. Davenport have her minute in peace. We can finish cleaning. Actually, Celeste interrupted, surprising herself with the words even as she spoke them. Would you two mind staying? Just for a little while. The silence was getting very loud and She trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence, not sure how to explain that sitting alone with her thoughts felt like drowning. Hannah giggled, a sound like bells. Silence can't be loud, silly. That's like saying water is dry or ice is hot. You'd think so, Celeste said. But trust me, sometimes when everything is quiet, that's when your brain gets really, really noisy. All the thoughts you don't want to think get louder when there's nothing else to hear. Hannah considered this with the seriousness of a philosopher. Oh, she said, I get that. Like when I'm trying to sleep and I remember all the embarrassing things I did that day. My brain gets so loud I have to put my pillow over my head. Exactly like that, Celeste agreed. Except I can't put a pillow over my head because I'm sitting in a hotel lobby. You could try, Hannah suggested helpfully. We have pillows in the linen closet, big fluffy ones. Ryan hesitated, clearly torn between professional boundaries and basic human kindness. Then he nodded and pushed the cleaning cart to the side, out of the walkway. He sat down on the floor as well, about 6 feet from Celeste, maintaining a respectful distance. Hannah immediately scooted over to sit between them, creating an impromptu triangle on the marble floor. This is like a picnic, Hannah announced happily. Except without food, a no-food picnic. The worst kind of picnic. Definitely the worst kind, Ryan agreed, and Celeste caught the hint of a smile playing at his lips, the first genuine expression of humor she'd seen from him. They sat there in companionable silence for a moment. The lobby lights hummed almost inaudibly above them. Somewhere in the hotel another pipe groaned. Outside the glass doors the ocean was invisible in the darkness, but Celeste could hear the waves hitting the shore with their eternal rhythm, utterly indifferent to human drama. Then Hannah, who clearly possessed an inability to tolerate quiet for more than 30 seconds, said, Ms. Pretty Lady, why are you so sad? Did someone take your favorite toy? Because when Billy took my favorite crayon at school, I was really sad. But then the teacher made him give it back and say sorry. Hannah, Ryan warned, but his voice was gentle. It's okay, Celeste said. She was surprised to discover she meant it. There was something refreshing about Hannah's directness, about the way she reduced complex adult situations to their emotional essence. Yes, someone took something very important from me. Actually, a lot of important things. Someone I trusted very much. That's really, really mean, Hannah said with the absolute moral certainty that only a child could possess, a certainty that hadn't yet learned about shades of gray or legal loopholes or the ways people could hurt you without technically breaking any laws. You should tell the teacher, or the police. They make people give back things they stole. I did tell people like that, Celeste said. The problem is the rules are much more complicated when you're a grown-up. Sometimes people can take things from you in ways that look okay on paper, even though they're really mean. Sometimes people can hurt you in ways that aren't technically against the law. That's a stupid rule, Hannah declared with passion. Grown-ups make stupid rules sometimes. Hannah Bell Walker, Ryan said, but there was laughter hiding in his voice rather than real reproach. They do, Daddy, Hannah insisted. Like how I can't have ice cream for breakfast even though it has milk and milk is good for you. But you can have coffee for breakfast and coffee is just hot, bitter ice cream without any of the good parts. Despite everything, despite the financial ruin, despite the betrayal, despite the uncertain future looming before her like a dark ocean, Celeste laughed. It was a real laugh this time, not the bitter, hollow sound from earlier. It bubbled up from somewhere genuine and surprised her with its force. She has a point, Celeste said. Don't encourage her, Ryan said. But he was smiling now too, really smiling, and it transformed his face entirely. The hard lines around his mouth softened. His dark eyes crinkled at the corners. He looked younger, lighter, like someone who hadn't forgotten how to find joy despite life's weight. She's already too smart for her own good. Her teacher says she asks more questions in a day than most kids ask in a week. Hannah beamed at this, clearly considering it high praise. Questions are important, Daddy says. That's how you learn things. If you don't ask questions, you stay dumb forever. I said uninformed, not dumb, Ryan corrected gently. There's a difference. Uninformed sounds like not wearing enough clothes, Hannah said seriously, like being in your underwear. This time both Celeste and Ryan laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the empty lobby, a moment of lightness in the heavy darkness of the night. Then Hannah, with the directness that only children truly possess, said, My daddy is really, really smart too. He fixes motorcycles and makes them go vroom vroom. He can fix anything. Literally anything. Last week he fixed Mrs. Chen's radio that nobody else could fix, not even the repair shop. Maybe he can fix what's broken for you? Celeste met Ryan's eyes over Hannah's head. She saw embarrassment there, and apology, but also something else. A question, perhaps. An offering. A door opening if she was brave enough to walk through it. I don't think motorcycles are the answer to my problems, Celeste said gently to Hannah. though I appreciate the thought. You'd be surprised, Ryan said quietly. Motorcycles teach you a lot about life. When they break down, you have to figure out why. You have to trace the problem back to its source. Sometimes the fix is simple, a loose connection, a dirty filter. Sometimes it's complicated. You have to rebuild the entire engine, replace parts, reimagine how things fit together. But there's always a solution. If you're willing to look hard enough and work long enough and not give up when the first 3 attempts fail. And what if you don't have the parts? Celeste asked, and she wasn't really talking about motorcycles anymore. What if the engine is so damaged that there's nothing to work with? Then you get creative, Ryan replied, and he wasn't talking about motorcycles either. You adapt. You improvise. You use what you have in new ways. You find parts in places other people wouldn't think to look. You'd be amazed what you can build with determination, duct tape, and a complete disregard for doing things the conventional way. Hannah nodded enthusiastically, her ponytails bouncing. Daddy made our whole kitchen table out of wood he found in a dumpster. He sanded it and painted it, and now it's the best table ever. It has our names carved in the bottom, mine and Daddy's and Mr. Hopscotch's. Hannah, Ryan said, and this time there was genuine embarrassment in his voice, color rising in his cheeks. But Celeste was looking at him with new interest, really seeing him now. You built furniture from salvaged materials? I build a lot of things, Ryan said, his discomfort obvious. It's how Hannah and I get by. When you can't afford to buy new, you learn to make old things new again. You learn to see potential in things other people consider garbage. Hannah's bookshelf came from pallets I found behind the grocery store. Our bed frame is made from an old door and cinder blocks. The shelves in our bathroom used to be someone's discarded ladder. None of it's fancy, but it's ours and it's sturdy and it works. An idea was forming in Celeste's mind, nebulous and half-formed but insistent. It felt crazy even as it took shape, impossible. The kind of desperate scheme that only someone with nothing left to lose would consider. What if? She started, then stopped, afraid to voice the thought. Afraid that speaking it aloud would reveal how truly absurd it was. What if what? Ryan prompted gently. The words came tumbling out, faster and faster, as if saying them quickly might make them more possible. What if we did that here? The hotel is mortgaged, but I still have 3 months before foreclosure proceedings really begin. The building is solid. Structurally sound, good bones, prime location. But the market says luxury hotels are oversaturated. Everyone's chasing the same high-end clientele with the same thread counts and the same amenities, and the same sterile luxury that you can find in 100 different hotels in 100 different cities. What if we didn't do that? Ryan was listening intently now, his full attention focused on her. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about authentic experiences, Celeste said, and she could feel the excitement building now, cutting through the exhaustion and despair like light through fog. I'm thinking about heritage tourism, about Americana, about vintage motorcycles and real craftsmanship and the kind of raw, honest aesthetic that can't be replicated by corporate hotel chains with their formulaic designs. You restore bikes, right? You understand the culture, the community. What if we turned the hotel parking garage into a showcase? A working restoration garage where guests could watch real mechanics doing real work, where they could take riding lessons, rent vintage bikes to tour the coast, learn about motorcycle history and culture, where it's not just a hotel amenity, but an actual experience. Ryan was silent for a long moment, thinking. Then he said slowly, That's actually not as crazy as it sounds. There's a growing market for that kind of thing. Experiential travel, they call it in the industry. People don't want to just sleep somewhere anymore. They want stories. They want to feel connected to something real. The adventure tourism industry has been growing faster than traditional luxury for years now. Exactly. Celeste felt energy returning to her body, replacing the numbness that had settled into her bones. And families. We're right here near the beach. Perfect location for families. But I never really catered to them because I was always chasing the luxury market, the business travelers, the wealthy couples. What if we created real spaces for kids? Not just a corner with some toys stuck in it. Not just a daycare where parents dump their children. Real experiences. Art studios where kids can actually create things. Cooking classes where they learn to make real food. Adventure programs. Nature exploration. Things that matter. Things they'll remember. She turned to Hannah. Hannah, if you could do anything at a hotel, anything at all, what would you want to do? Hannah's eyes went wide with excitement, as if no adult had ever asked her opinion on something important before. I'd want to draw pictures. Lots and lots of pictures. And learn about motorcycles like Daddy. Except not the dangerous parts until I'm older. and have a treasure hunt where you actually find treasure, not just stickers, and make friends with other kids who like the same things I like, and learn how to build stuff, and maybe have a garden where you can grow vegetables and see where food really comes from. See? Celeste looked at Ryan triumphantly. Kids know what they want. And it's not fancy. It's not expensive. It's real. It's meaningful. We could build something completely different from every other hotel on this coast. Something that's about connection and experience and authenticity instead of just luxury and status. This would take money, Ryan said carefully. Money you don't have anymore. No direct capital, no, Celeste admitted. But I have a building with significant equity even with the mortgage. I could potentially get a small business loan if I had a really solid, innovative plan. Something that banks would see as financially viable even if it's unconventional. And I have contacts throughout the industry. Not in the high-end luxury space anymore, not after this scandal, but maybe in different spaces. Vendors who might work on consignment if the concept excited them. Craftspeople who'd love the exposure and the chance to teach their skills. Local businesses that might see partnership opportunities. We wouldn't need millions to start. We'd just need enough to begin, to prove the concept, to show that it works. And your reputation? Ryan asked quietly. The news stories about the fraud, the bankruptcy. You don't think that will follow you? Celeste's excitement dimmed slightly, reality reasserting itself. It's a problem, she admitted. A significant problem, but maybe it's also an opportunity if we frame it correctly. The narrative doesn't have to be failed CEO. It could be woman rebuilding after betrayal. That's human, that's relatable. People love a comeback story, they love an underdog. And what's more underdog than trying to rebuild a hotel from nothing with a janitor and his 7-year-old daughter? With a janitor, Ryan repeated, and there was something unreadable in his voice. You need to understand what that means, Ms. Davenport. If we're really considering this, if you're actually serious about some kind of partnership, you need to understand who you'd be partnering with. I'm not a businessman. I don't have a degree in hospitality management or finance or anything useful. I have a GED that I got while working full-time and raising a baby. I'm a janitor who fixes bikes in his spare time and builds furniture from garbage. I don't have business cards or an LLC or any of the professional polish you're used to working with. But you have skills I don't have, Celeste countered. Skills I desperately need. You know how to build from nothing. You understand the value of things beyond their price tags. You see potential in what other people overlook. You're resourceful in ways I've never had to be. And you're honest. God, Ryan. After Marcus and his lies and his manipulations, honest sounds like a genuine superpower. Hannah was looking between them, her eyes moving back and forth like she was watching a tennis match. She could sense the importance of the moment even if she didn't fully understand all the adult complexities at play. Are you going to work together? She asked. Like a real team? With a team name and everything? Maybe, Celeste said. Then looking directly at Ryan. If you're interested. I know this is completely insane. I know I'm basically asking you to gamble your time and energy and skills on a failed CEO's desperate last-ditch plan. I can't pay you a salary, not at first. I can barely pay myself. But I'm willing to split any profits equally right down the middle. 50-50 on everything. Not a boss and an employee. Not even employer and contractor. True partners. Equal stake, equal say, equal risk, equal reward. Ryan was quiet for so long that Celeste thought he would refuse. Thought she'd pushed too far, asked too much from a man who was already working 2 jobs to support his daughter. Then he said slowly, I'd need to keep my janitorial position here, at least at first, at least until we have some income. Hannah and I need the steady paycheck, and we need the health insurance. I can't risk that, but my off hours, my weekends, all my mechanical skills and construction knowledge, those I could contribute, and Hannah would need to come along sometimes, probably most times. I can't afford additional childcare beyond what I'm already paying for school hours. Hannah's more than welcome, Celeste said immediately. In fact, having a kid around might be the best focus group we could ask for. She'll keep us honest about what real families actually want instead of what we think they want. And you have to promise me something, Ryan continued, his voice firm now, taking on an edge of steel. You have to promise you'll tell me the truth, always. If this is failing, if the money's running out faster than we planned, if you're having second thoughts or if creditors are circling, or if you wake up one morning and realize this was all a terrible idea, you tell me immediately. No corporate doublespeak. No protecting my feelings. No optimistic projections that aren't based in reality. We're either real partners who trust each other completely, or we're nothing at all. Celeste extended her hand across the marble floor. Deal. Complete honesty, complete transparency, complete partnership. Ryan looked at her extended hand for a moment. Then he reached out and shook it. His grip was firm, his palm calloused from years of work, and somehow that felt more reassuring than any corporate contract she'd ever signed in a lawyer's office. This was real. This was solid. This was two people shaking hands and meaning it. Hannah clapped her hands together with delight. This is so exciting. Can I help too? I'm really good at coloring, and I have lots of ideas. Like, what if there was a room that was just for drawing and it had all the colors and you could draw on the walls? I think we'll find plenty of ways you can help, Celeste told her seriously. Every good team needs someone with creative vision, someone who can see things the way kids see them, without all the boring adult complications. What's creative vision? Hannah asked. It means making sure everything looks beautiful and feels right, Celeste explained. Making sure we remember to include the things that matter, like colors and fun and imagination. Hannah nodded so enthusiastically her ponytails bounced. I can definitely do that. Mr. Hopscotch can help too. He's very creative. He once helped me design a rocket ship out of cardboard boxes. Then we're a team of 4, Ryan said with a slight smile, nodding toward the stuffed rabbit. This is either the smartest thing we've ever done or the most spectacularly stupid. Probably both, Celeste agreed. But at least we'll fail spectacularly if we fail. No failing, Hannah declared. We're going to succeed super big and make the best hotel ever. And everyone will want to come see it. They all stood up and Celeste felt her legs protest painfully. She'd been sitting on the hard marble floor for too long, and her muscles had stiffened in the cold of the air conditioning. But the stiffness was good, in a strange way. It was physical proof that she'd survived the worst night of her life. She'd hit bottom, just like Ryan said, and she'd found it solid enough to stand on, solid enough to build on. We should start planning immediately, Celeste said, and she could hear the energy returning to her voice, the executive decisiveness that had served her well before everything fell apart. Today, this morning, I'll draft a business plan, reach out to potential vendors, start researching the experiential travel market in depth. Ryan, can you assess the garage space? Figure out what we'd actually need to convert it into a working restoration shop that's also presentable and safe for guests to observe. I can do that, Ryan said. I'll bring my tools after my shift, take measurements, maybe sketch out some preliminary floor plans. Nothing fancy, but enough to see if the space can actually work for what we're imagining. And I'll draw pictures, Hannah added enthusiastically. Very beautiful pictures with lots of colors. And I'll think of ideas for the kids' stuff because I'm a kid, so I know what kids like. Perfect, Celeste said, and she felt it now. Not quite hope, not yet, but something adjacent to it. Possibility, potential, the faint glimmer of a path forward through the darkness. As Ryan gathered his cleaning supplies and took Hannah's small hand in his larger one, preparing to leave, Celeste said quietly, Ryan, thank you for sitting with me tonight, for listening, for not treating me like I was crazy, for taking this absolutely insane risk on someone whose life just imploded. He smiled, and again she noticed how it transformed his entire face, softening all the hard edges that years of labor and struggle had carved there. We're not that different, you know. You lost everything in one night, and now you're trying to rebuild from scratch. I've been rebuilding for 7 years, one day at a time. Maybe together we'll finally figure out how to build something that actually lasts. After they left, walking toward the employee entrance with Hannah chattering excitedly about treasure hunts and drawing rooms, Celeste stood alone in the lobby again. But the silence wasn't screaming anymore. It was just quiet, the normal, peaceful quiet of a building at rest, waiting for morning, waiting for whatever would come next. She walked to the front desk and found a notepad and pen in the drawer where the night receptionist usually kept crossword puzzles. In her clear, precise handwriting, she wrote, "The Mel Brock Hotel, a new vision." Then underneath she began to list ideas: heritage tourism, vintage motorcycles, authentic family experiences, real craftsmanship, teaching opportunities, community building, built on the bones of the past, designed for the future. It wasn't much. It was barely the skeleton of a plan. But it was infinitely more than she'd had 8 hours ago when the lawyers had told her everything was gone, that Marcus had taken it all, that she was left with nothing but debt and a building she couldn't afford to keep. She thought about her father, about the way he'd named this place by mixing Mel and Brooke, sweetness and constant flow. He'd been a romantic, her father, someone who believed in metaphors and symbols, someone who thought carefully about the meaning of things. Maybe that's what she needed to remember now, to be sweet enough to forgive herself for failing, and to flow forward despite all the obstacles trying to hold her back. The sun was beginning to rise outside the floor-to-ceiling lobby windows, painting the marble floor in gradually shifting shades of amber and gold and pale rose. Celeste walked to the glass and watched the beach beyond, where the early morning joggers were already out with their dogs, where the waves rolled in with the same eternal rhythm they'd maintained for millions of years, utterly indifferent to human drama and human failure and human attempts to rebuild. Tomorrow, no, today, it was already today, she'd start making calls. She'd face the creditors with their threatening letters, and the critics with their knowing smirks, and the curious onlookers who couldn't wait to watch how far the mighty had fallen. She'd contact vendors and craftspeople and local business owners. She'd research experiential tourism and heritage hotels and family travel trends. She'd draft a business plan that was innovative enough to interest lenders, despite her recent spectacular failure. But she wouldn't be facing any of it alone anymore. She had Ryan with his rough hands and honest eyes and 7 years of experience building something from nothing. She had Hannah, with her stuffed rabbit and her fearless questions, and her absolute certainty that success was possible. She had a building with good bones and a plan that was just crazy enough to work, if they were brave enough to try it. 3 months until foreclosure. 90 days to pull off a miracle. 90 days to either build something extraordinary or fail so completely that there would be no coming back. Celeste Davenport smiled at her reflection in the glass, and for the first time in hours it felt genuine. The lobby was filling with the pale golden light of dawn when she finally walked to the elevator. She'd go to her office. Yes, she still had an office, at least for the next 90 days, and she'd start working. Not because she was certain of success, not because she had any guarantees, but because the alternative was giving up, and she'd spent enough time on the floor tonight to know that wasn't who she wanted to be. As the elevator doors closed, she caught her reflection in the polished brass interior. Her makeup was smudged, dark circles visible under her eyes. Her blazer was wrinkled beyond redemption. Her carefully styled hair was falling out of its professional bun in uneven strands. She looked like someone who'd been through hell and barely crawled out the other side. She looked like someone who'd survived. The elevator climbed smoothly, and Celeste let herself feel the full weight of her exhaustion, knowing that once she reached her office, there would be no time for weakness. The work would begin immediately, the impossible work of transforming a dying luxury hotel into something entirely new, something authentic, something that could compete not by being fancier or more expensive than the competition, but by being real in ways that corporate hotels could never replicate. Ryan's words echoed in her mind. You'd be amazed what you can build with determination, duct tape, and a complete disregard for doing things the conventional way. She was about to find out if that was true. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, still dark, still silent. Her office was at the end of the hall, and she walked toward it with steady steps, each one feeling more solid than the last. Behind her office door waited her computer, her files, her contacts, all the tools she'd need to build this impossible plan. Behind her, somewhere in the building, Ryan was probably taking Hannah home to their studio apartment, probably making those promised pancakes, probably telling her that they were going to do something brave and scary and potentially wonderful. And somewhere out there, the sun was rising on a new day, on new possibilities, on the chance to take the worst thing that had ever happened to her and transform it into something that might just save her. Celeste Davenport opened her office door, turned on the lights, sat down at her desk, and began to work. 3 months passed like a storm, intense, transformative, exhausting in ways that rebuilt rather than destroyed. The Melbrook Hotel transformed from a dying luxury property into something no one in the hospitality industry had seen before, something that defied category and exceeded expectation. Ryan converted the sprawling parking garage into Heritage Garage, a working restoration shop with floor-to-ceiling glass walls that allowed guests to watch him rebuild vintage Harley-Davidsons piece by careful piece. He'd installed vintage workbenches salvaged from a closing factory, hung tools on pegboards he'd built himself, and created a space that was equal parts workshop and museum. Guests gathered daily to watch him work, asking questions, learning about engines and history and the meditation of manual labor. Some even signed up for weekend workshops where Ryan taught basic motorcycle maintenance, his patience and knowledge winning him a devoted following. Hannah's colorful artwork covered the walls of what became the Creation Station, a children's studio where kids from around the country came to paint, build, sculpt, and imagine without limits. Celeste had given Hannah full creative control over the space, And the 7-year-old had designed something magical: tables at different heights for different ages, supply stations organized by color, a gallery wall where every child's work was displayed with the same respect given to fine art. Parents wept watching their children's faces light up with creative joy, and several families extended their stays just so their kids could attend more sessions. Celeste had secured a small business loan by presenting a business plan so innovative that 3 traditional banks rejected it outright before a young loan officer at a credit union recognized its brilliance. She negotiated with vendors, many of whom agreed to consignment arrangements when they heard her story. She worked 18-hour days, learned to sand wood alongside Ryan, discovered calluses on her hands and satisfaction in physical labor that her corporate life had never provided. The wealthy CEO who once only touched keyboards learned to use power tools, to see beauty in reclaimed materials, to understand that building something with your hands created a connection no amount of money could buy. The soft opening in month 2 exceeded every projection they'd dared to make. Families arrived seeking authentic experiences and found something that felt like coming home. Motorcycle enthusiasts flew in from across the country to see Ryan's restorations and stayed for the community they discovered. Parents cried watching their children flourish in Hannah's creative spaces. The hotel wasn't just surviving, it was thriving in ways Celeste's luxury properties, with their Michelin-starred restaurants and 1,000-thread-count sheets, never had. This was different. This was real. But the most profound transformation happened between Celeste and Ryan themselves. Working side by side, they discovered a connection that went far beyond business partnership or mutual respect. There were late nights in the garage where she handed him tools, and he taught her about engines, his grease-stained hands gentle and sure, his voice patient as he explained the philosophy hidden in mechanical work. There were early mornings in the office where he reviewed budgets with surprising insight, and she learned to see value in things that would never appear on a balance sheet. There were shared meals with Hannah, the 3 of them becoming something that looked remarkably like a family, though neither adult had dared to name it yet. Hannah had become the heart of their unusual household, calling Celeste Ms. Celeste with such pure affection that it made her chest tight every single time. The little girl treated the hotel as her kingdom, greeting guests with confidence, showing other children around the creation station, even helping her father in the garage by organizing small parts in labeled containers she'd decorated herself. On a rainy Saturday afternoon in month 3, with storm clouds darkening the California coast and guests gathered in the warm lobby for hot chocolate and board games, Hannah decided to explore the hotel's attic storage, something Celeste had given her explicit permission to do. Knowing the girl's boundless curiosity needed outlets, and appreciating her careful respect for old things, Hannah returned an hour later, her yellow dress dusty, her white sneakers leaving small footprints on the marble, carrying a large photo album with a leather cover worn soft by time. Her eyes were wide with the particular excitement of a child who's discovered something important. "Ms. Celeste, Daddy, you have to come see this right now. It's really, really important." They abandoned their work, Celeste her laptop, Ryan his engine diagrams, and gathered around the lobby table where Hannah carefully laid the album down. She opened it with reverent hands, the way she handled all old things, understanding somehow that they carried stories. Inside were photographs from the hotel's early years, pictures from the 1990s and early 2000s showing staff gatherings, summer events, holiday celebrations, the gradual evolution of the property through different eras. Hannah flipped through pages slowly narrating what she saw until she stopped suddenly at one particular photograph, her small finger pointing. "Look," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "It's you, both of you, when you were little like me." The photograph showed 2 children on the hotel's private beach on what looked like a perfect summer day. A blonde girl, maybe 7 years old, was kneeling in the sand, building an elaborate sandcastle. Beside her, a dark-haired boy around 8 years old was helping her dig a deep moat around the structure. They were laughing, their heads close together, completely absorbed in their shared project. The joy between them was palpable even through the faded photograph. Celeste's hand trembled as she took the album, pulling it closer. The handwritten caption in her father's distinctive writing read, "Summer 2005. Young visitors enjoying our beach." The magic of childhood friendship. "That's impossible," she whispered. But even as she said it, she recognized things. The beach chair in the background with her father's favorite blue blazer draped over it. The specific section of beach where the sand was finest. And the boy beside her younger self. Those eyes, that smile, the way he held his head. Ryan was staring at the photo, his face pale, his hands gripping the edge of the table. I remember, he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. I remember everything. My mother worked here that summer. Maria Walker, housekeeping staff. She brought me to work sometimes when school was out and she couldn't afford a babysitter. There was a girl, the owner's daughter. We spent a whole week building sandcastles together. You taught me that moats need to be deeper than people think, Celeste said, the memories flooding back with such crystalline clarity, it felt like yesterday rather than 20 years ago. You said water always finds the weakest point, so you have to dig deep and wide. You were so serious about it, like engineering a real castle. You told me your father named the hotel by mixing Mel and Brooke, Ryan continued, his voice thick with emotion, eyes never leaving the photograph. You said it meant sweetness and flow, and that you were going to run it someday and make it the best hotel in California. You were so determined even at 7. You said you'd make it a place where people felt happy. Then my mother got a job closer to home, Ryan said, and there was old pain in his voice now, the kind that had softened but never fully healed. Better pay, better hours. We moved away at the end of summer. I always wondered what happened to the girl with the big dreams and the serious face when she talked about sandcastle engineering. Hannah looked between them, her young mind processing what the adults were struggling to comprehend, understanding dawning in her bright eyes. You knew each other? Before all of this? When you were kids like me? We did, Celeste said, and tears were streaming down her face now, unchecked and unashamed. I remember everything. Your mother was so kind to me that summer. It was the first summer after my mother died and I was so lonely. You played with me every single day. You didn't treat me different because I was the owner's daughter. You were my friend, my best friend. I cried for weeks after you left. I asked my mom about you for months, Ryan admitted. I wanted to come back, to visit, but we'd moved 2 hours away and money was tight and then time just passed, the way it does. I never forgot you though. I never forgot that summer. They stood there, the three of them frozen in this moment of impossible recognition, as the truth settled around them like gentle snow, transforming everything they thought they knew about how they'd come to this place. The hotel wasn't just a building they were saving. It was the place where their souls had first recognized each other as kindred spirits. 20 years ago, 2 lonely children had found friendship and joy in this exact spot. Now, as adults carrying their own distinct wounds and hard-won hopes, they'd found each other again when they both needed it most desperately. The universe brought you back together, Hannah said with the profound wisdom that children sometimes possess when they see clearly what adults overcomplicate. Because you're supposed to be a family, like we are now, like we've been becoming. Celeste looked at Ryan, really looked at him, and saw her own overwhelming emotions reflected perfectly in his eyes. Wonder, recognition, the bone-deep sense that some connections are far too profound to be mere accidents. She thought about fate and second chances, about how the worst night of her life sitting broken on a hotel lobby floor had led her back to someone who'd mattered long before she understood what mattering truly meant. The hotel's not just surviving, Ryan said softly, taking her hand in his calloused palm warm against hers. It's bringing people home. It brought us home to each other. 2 months later, the Melbrook Hotel was featured in national travel magazines as the innovative property that reinvented hospitality by remembering what hotels were meant to be, places where strangers become friends and families create memories that last generations. The foreclosure was canceled. The debt was manageable and shrinking monthly. Their booking calendar was full 6 months out. But more importantly, infinitely more importantly, they'd built something that actually mattered beyond profit margins. On the anniversary of their partnership, Celeste and Ryan stood on the same stretch of beach where that childhood photograph had been taken, where 2 lonely kids had built sandcastles and found friendship. Hannah was 20 feet away building an elaborate castle with 3 new friends she'd made that week, her laughter carrying on the ocean breeze like music, Mr. Hopscotch supervising from his position on a beach towel. Your father was right about everything, Ryan said, taking her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. Sweet and flow. You lost everything. The empire, the money, the life you thought you were building. But you found something infinitely better. We found something better, Celeste corrected gently, squeezing his hand. She looked at the hotel behind them, at Hannah and her friends, at Ryan's weathered, honest, beautiful face. She'd started with an empire built on luxury and lost it all in one devastating night, but she'd gained a real family, a genuine purpose, and the profound understanding that some treasures simply don't appear on balance sheets or in bank accounts. The hotel had good bones, her father always said. But bones need a soul to make them truly live, to make them matter. They'd given the Melbrook Hotel its soul back, with vintage motorcycles and children's laughter, with honest work and impossible second chances, with a love story that had waited patiently for 20 years to finish what had started on a summer beach long ago. As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the endless sky in shades of amber and gold and deep rose, Celeste Davenport finally understood what wealth really meant. It wasn't in the things Marcus had stolen. It wasn't in the empire she'd built and lost. It was in Hannah's small hand reaching for hers during dinner, in Ryan's quiet strength beside her every morning, in the building behind them filled with families creating memories they'd carry for lifetimes. She'd hit bottom and found it solid. Then she'd built something extraordinary on that foundation, not despite her failure, but because of it. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. Because sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you leads you exactly where you were always meant to be. The waves rolled in with their eternal rhythm, indifferent and beautiful, and Celeste smiled. The bottom had been a beginning, not an ending. And what they'd built together, this family, this place, this second chance, would last far longer than any empire ever could. Hannah ran up to them, sandy and glowing, and took both their hands. "Come see our castle. It has the deepest moat ever, just like you taught me, Daddy, and it's going to last forever." Ryan and Celeste exchanged a look over her head, both knowing the castle would last until the tide came in, but understanding that the memory of building it together would indeed last forever. That was the real magic, not in what lasted, but in what you built together while you could. They walked hand in hand toward the castle, toward the children's laughter, toward the future they were building one day at a time. And behind them, the Melbrook Hotel stood solid and welcoming, its lights beginning to glow in the gathering dusk, ready to embrace another night of families and stories, and the quiet miracle of people finding their way home.